Hey y'all, Teri Gigi here. I am here to give you a Storytime video. It's one I've wanted to tell for a long time, but I never had the nerve, but today's the day. Yeah, so here we go. Circle back to the early 80s, 81, 82. Scott and I had just gotten married, and we moved straight out to West Texas for him to work in the oil field. As soon as we got there, this really sweet lady, which I thought was an old lady at the time, but now looking back, she was probably in her early 40s, mid 40s. She came to our house, invited us to church, and we joined a big Baptist church in the small town we lived in. Everybody there had been born and raised. We were kind of an oddity because even though we'd been married, at the time this story happened, we'd been married a little over a year and we still didn't have children. So everybody thought we were weird, but everybody was super nice and we made some really good friends and had a great time in the 2 or so years that we lived there. Even though it was the middle of nowhere and it had its quirks, it was nice because we had friends. Okay, we had a big Sunday school department and they planned a ski trip. And the lady, Eloise, was kind of the head of the department. She was super sweet. And so we were all gonna load on a bus and go to New Mexico and go skiing. Well, Scott and I immediately signed up, and this was a couples trip. Scott and I signed up. I was a skier. He had just kind of started skiing, so we were super excited. The night before the trip, he got a call from his boss that he had to go out on a rig. Period. It didn't matter that he had vacation. It didn't matter that he had days off. When there's a boom in Texas, you go. So I called to cancel and she said, this just happened to another woman in the class, so why don't you two room together? I said, great. So I went on the trip with Scott's blessing. He wanted me to go. So we go on the trip. We have this great time skiing. But the first morning when we all left breakfast, I figured out really quickly that every single woman in the class was going to the bunny slope for ski lessons. Well, I had been skiing for years, so I wasn't going to spend the money on that. So I just thought, I guess I'll ski by myself. Well, all the guys, none of the guys had skied, but they weren't going to the class. They were just going to go to the top of the mountain. You know how guys are in their late 20s, early 30s. And so off they went, and they said, hey, you can just come with us. And I thought, okay. Now, let me explain. Skiing is not an intimate sport on any level. I mean, you're bundled up, you've got glasses, you've got a hat, you've got a giant jacket. You don't ski together. You just get to the mountain together and then you meet each other at the bottom. So one of the men, good friend of mine and Scott's, the couple, we were friends. And he said, we got down to the end of the line to get on the chairlift and there was just kind of him and I left and he goes, you want to just ride with me? And I went, oh. Yeah, sure. And I didn't like doing that, but it was, I mean, you're in the middle of snow and, you know. So for the morning, I skied up and down the mountain, roughly kind of hanging with those people that I knew because I didn't want to ski alone in case I fell and got hurt or something like that. Everybody met back up for lunch at the lodge, and then I skied with the girls and the guys the rest of the trip. And my friend, who I had roomed with, we hung out together, so we had a great time. Fast forward about 6 months. I'm in my backyard and one of the same guy I sat on the ski lift with, who was our good friend again, super good friends, pulled up because I was in my backyard with a new puppy and we had a fence, cyclone fence, so he could see me. We lived on a corner and they lived about 3 streets away. He pulled over to come see the puppy. So we talked for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. He held the puppy and then he said, I better go before somebody sees us talking. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, you know, the rumors. The minute he said that, I thought I was going to throw up. I don't even remember if I said anything to him. I probably said, what rumors? And he just kind of evaded the question. I went in the house and I absolutely burst into tears. Of course, Scott's out on a rig. I can't contact him. I am hysterically crying, thinking that everyone at church thinks this. And then I started thinking, what if Eloise thinks this? That was the woman, did I already tell you that? And the preacher, what if the preacher thinks it? And I was sobbing. I was so humiliated. I was so embarrassed. I couldn't figure out where did that come from. I called Eloise. I'm blubbering, I'm crying on the phone. And y'all, I'm like 21 or 22. I'm blubbering on the phone. She says, I'm on my way. She comes right over and she comes in. She goes, what is wrong? And I told her. And she just looked at me and she goes, I've never heard that. I've never heard that. And I said, well, you have to fix it. I'm so upset. I can't believe it. And she said, you know what? I'll be back. And she left. And I thought, I wonder what she's doing. So I calmed myself down. I quit crying. And about 15 minutes went by and there was a knock at my door. And now it's like evening. There's a knock at my door. And I went, oh, it's Eloise. She's figured it out. So I opened the door and it was my good friend, the guy's wife. She's been crying. She comes in, she hugs me. She says, I never believed it. I'm so sorry. I never believed a word of it. And I said, why didn't you tell me? And she goes, I didn't know what to do. I was horrified. And she said, I didn't believe it. I promise, I promise. And then she said, that's why I quit singing in the choir. And I'm like, what? So here's how it went. Scott and I always sat with them on Sunday mornings. We had our certain pew, like third pew, I remember. And they had 3 little kids. So it would be her husband, the 3 little kids, and me. I always sat by the little girl. She was about 7, so adorable. We would color and chit chat and have little candy and stuff. I loved this little girl. I want a little girl just like her, right? And then Scott. So that's how we always sat. Well, when Scott was on a rig for the weekend, I would still sit, 3 children away from him, and his wife is right there in the choir, right? And she told me, I just decided to quit the choir and come sit with y'all because I just felt like that was something I could do to maybe make the rumor go away. And I said, who started it? Well, she wasn't going to tell me. And she finally did. And I was like, I've never even talked to that woman. And she said, yeah, I know. And what she did was, on the ski trip, that woman told my friend, you better look out for Teri. You better watch it because she is after your husband. I guess maybe she saw us on the ski lift. I don't even know. The 2 times, maybe even just once that I rode with him. And so evidently the rumor was widespread because my friend quit the choir. Otherwise she wouldn't have, So Scott gets home. I tell her, okay, it's not your fault, but I'm kind of upset still that they didn't just come tell me. So Scott gets home like the next day. I tell him he is so furious. He is so angry. He can't stand it. And I said, these are our good friends. Now we can't even be friends with them. We can't hang out with them. We can't do anything. Oh my God, we've got to move. We've got to move. I said, you're right. We're moving. And then we calmed down. And I said, now what do? Do we go to church tomorrow? Because that was a Saturday. He said, no, we're not going back. And then we talked. And he said, no, we're going. He said, we have no reason to hide. So Sunday morning, I was sick to my stomach. I was so scared to go because, I just didn't know. I didn't know if the preacher knew. I tell y'all, Eloise came back over that night or called me that night and said, it's not very widespread, I don't think. Anyway, we get to church. We did not sit with the friends. We sat like 2 rows back. So awkward. Even though I'd been sitting with them during the whole rumor. And the woman that started the rumor also sang in the choir. She was she had bleach blonde, really short hair. She was married, but she was robust, I'll say. She was really a big woman. And she was really pretty though. She had perfect makeup. Anyway, she was sitting in the choir loft and the preacher got up to preach. And I'm kind of sinking down in my pew because I'm thinking, I wonder if he knows. I wonder what he thinks. Because once people plant a seed, people don't forget, especially a juicy seed like that. So the preacher gets up to preach and he's preaching on gossip. And I said, I looked at Scott, and Scott looked at me, and he started laughing. He goes, he knows. He knows. Eloise has called him and told him about this. Because, you know, in a small town, everybody knows everything. And I didn't know this. I'd come from a college town where you could be dating someone and go to dinner with somebody else. Nobody cared. Nobody thought anything. No, it wasn't like that. Everybody was friends, you know? And so the preacher proceeded to preach, and I could tell that Scott was staring at the woman because I could see her up there, third, top row, all the way to the right. I could see her perfectly. And so I started staring at her too. She was squirming, y'all, squirming in her seat. It was hilarious for Scott and I anyway. And so I will tell you though, and he preached a good sermon on it and said how destructive it is and how it can ruin people's lives and how it can cause division and all the things. And so anyway, we went home, and you know, church was never the same. I don't think we went back to another Sunday school party, which we had parties all the time. I used to have this couple over with other couples all the time and all their kids. And I would pretend like I was the mom. I mean, I would set up this special table for the children, and I would have special punch and special food and special prizes and everything. I loved being with all these kids and their parents. And anyway, we never did that again. And then probably a month or two later, the bottom dropped out of the oil boom. It's either feast or famine. Usually, that's how it used to be in Texas. It was feast or famine. Houston would boom and West Texas would boom, and everybody had work and everybody made tons of money, and then it would bust. According to something, I don't even know what. Maybe OPEC? So the bottom dropped out. He said, we're getting out of here. We're leaving this town, because they had let go of all the drill stem engineers and there were only 2 left. So when there was a job, Scott was working on rotation constantly. So he was never home. We packed our bags a month later, drove to Arlington, moved in with some friends from the oil business, and lived with them 6 weeks, found ourselves a house, and within a year, we started our family. So don't gossip if you can help it. Don't start rumors, especially when you have absolutely no basis. I never found out what the basis was for the rumor. It's very destructive. It caused my friend to not sing in the choir, and it's just not good. So that's my story time video. Luckily, nothing like this ever happened to me again. Yeah. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this story time video, and I'll see you next week. Bye.